Greetings, everyone. This is On My Face with Theorycrafting Thursday, episode 2, and today we are going to be talking about random variables in relation, how it's related to Starcraft 2. Here's my pretty face. Hello, I clicked the wrong button. I actually want this one to be full screen, since some of our slides are going to be a lot bigger than normal because I threw a few more pictures in there, and we're going to talk about a few stories that I have prepared. So we're going to just kind of jump right in. Again, I'm On My Face. Today is, what is it, January 19th, 2012. So let's jump into it. So first we're going to define random variables. And I think rather than just like having a straight up definition, I'm going to give my examples right up front. Easily describing random variables without showing these nasty equations or whatnot is to look at two things: blackjack and the Motley Hall problem. Blackjack and how random variables is associated with that is everyone is or should have played blackjack at one point in their life, and we can look at whenever cards are being displayed, like through just a normal deck of cards, which is 52, if we can see that aces are in the first hand, we should know for 100% of fact that like the ace of spades will not show up again until we reshuffle that deck. Now, when we start out, it's random. We don't know exactly what the count is if we're trying to be fancy in blackjack that way. But as soon as we start getting some information, we can then apply statistics and these random variables to understand the probability of drawing another card. So if we see a lot of face cards, we know that usually a lot of lower cards are about to come out. And vice versa, if we see a lot of low cards, we'll get some high cards. And that's how all these kind of smart people from MIT and everything else developed all these different types of counting systems, assigning values of face cards as +1 or +2, the cards 7 through 9 to either be 0 or +1, and then anything lower than that, either it's a 0 or -1. And then there's other crazy variations of starting at 0 for the count, starting at like 20 for the count. There's just a whole lot of different methods of doing it, but they all focus around this one fact of these random variables and how as soon as you see some cards, you can actually then start predicting what is more likely to come. And what most counting systems do is they want to know if the deck is hot, if there's a lot of face cards, because if they know the deck is hot, then statistically, then they're going to bet higher, so they're going to win more money. And that's kind of the whole theory behind blackjack and counting systems, but it's all based around this random variables of we know that the deck or the entire shoe of 10 decks is completely random, but as time goes on we can start kind of deducing what's going on, and that's all statistically based, so it's not going to be 100% accurate, but we're going to relate that to Starcraft 2 in just a little bit. Another quick way, if that was a little confusing, is the Motley Hall. Oh crap, I don't have a slide for it, but the Motley Hall problem right here is very simple. We have 3 doors. As a game show host, Motley Hall was an MC in the 70s, and I think on Let's Make a Deal. And so one of the problems that he would portray is he would show a contestant 3 doors that are shut. And for this example, we have a car, a brand new spectacular Porsche 911 behind one of these doors, and if you can guess that door, you can get it. However, behind the other 2 doors are goats. And if you pick those doors, then you win a goat rather than the car. And so we look at this problem and we have 3 choices. And we have 3 choices right here. Let me actually grab, where's my little pen? So we have 3 choices, 2 goats, which are the bad, and then 1 little race car. So essentially looking at this from the start, we have a 1/3 chance of getting this right. And so without knowing really any other information, we just say, I'm going to pick door 1. Now, rather than Motley Hall opening up door 1, he actually opens up door 2 to show, here's a goat that you did not pick, And now I'm going to give you the choice of keeping the door that you selected, or you can switch to door 3 without obviously showing what is behind door 3. And so it left the kind of contestant to make a decision of keeping door 1, knowing that door 2 was the wrong answer, or switching to door 3. Now, a lot of people would look at this situation and without knowing anything about random variables will say, like, well, I'm just going to keep door 1 because it was a 1/3 chance and I'm just going to keep with it, just being stubborn. A lot of other people will say, I'm going to keep door 1 because now it's still a 50% chance of still winning the car, I'll just stick with door 1. But that's actually incredibly false. Because Motley Hall gave us this information, he actually increased this door's percentage to 66% of being the correct door, rather than the measly 33% that we started with. And so with him giving you the option of switching between these two choices, statistically you should switch to door 3. And in this example, you would have won the car. Now, with kind of going over that real quickly of the random variables, how does that relate to StarCraft 2 at all? And right now I have the picture of the Motley Hall scenario to the right of it. Right from the start, we can look at the race selection. Now, again, we had 3 choices, and usually not a whole lot of players play random anymore, but that's something that we have to deduce. Usually we deduce that with scouting, or if we get scouted. Say if an overlord comes in at around the 1-minute mark, we know that there's Zerg. Boop! Simple selection. And then from knowing that there's Zerg, we can start formulating different types of thoughts of like, oh, they may be doing this type of build, so I have to do this, and so on and so forth. The next one, which is extremely popular, is most of the maps in the current map pool are actually 4 spawning location maps. Now, how the Motley Hall scenario comes into this play is usually we don't know where they are. Yeah, we may know there's Zerg or whatnot, but we don't know exactly if they're in the top right, in the bottom left, or in cross positions. And so usually how we determine where they are is to send out an early worker and just scout around. How you can use random variables, say if you're Terran and you're going to send out a scout after your Rax versus a Protoss player, if that Protoss player throws down his pylon and scouts your base, and it's early enough and you should have a good feeling of when a probe usually comes after a probe scout or a gateway scout. But if the probe comes in, then you can say, aha, you must be in either the top right or the lower left location, in layman's speak, in close ground distance, rather than cross position, since a lot of people don't scout in cross position. And so we decide, oh, we're going to scout to see if you're taking Nexus first or whatnot, so we go to the top right. And say we're wrong. Say like, oh, there's nothing here. Well, using the random variables, that's like Motley Hall opening up a door and saying, nope, that wasn't it. And so 66% of the time, he's actually going to be in the bottom left rather than the cross position. A little thing, usually it doesn't matter too much, but there's an example of how random variables affect even the very, very early game. Moving on to our third item, starting builds. With that scouting information, and it could be at the 3-minute mark, it could be at the 8-minute mark, or really anything else, we can say, oh, 2 gateways are being built right now. So he must be either going for a 2-gate pressure, or if he already has a gate, he's doing a 3-gate. So I have to prepare for a 3-gate. Now statistically, that's, okay, I scouted it, and now I leave. And most of the time, yes, he will be doing this sort of 3-gate pressure or 4-gate type of thing, but what happens if he cancels both of those gateways immediately and throw down Sorobo? You're then kind of saying, oh, I scouted this and it was about 50% way done, so that's obviously what he's doing. Another very classic example for Protoss is they would start a Nexus, a player would scout the Nexus and go, oh, he's fast expanding, so I can take a fast expand. And as soon as the STD leaves, or the drone or whatever leaves, the Protoss player would cancel the Nexus and make 3 gates to go up to a 4 gate and then push the player. And that's why having constant knowledge is good, since all you're really doing with that scout is you're getting some variables and you're just setting them on a build. Such as Terran, if you scout their base and they have no gases, you're expecting they're going to do a gasless expand. But then there is that 5% or 10% or however many percent that they can be able to do a 6 racks all in. And if you're saying they're going to take an expansion, I'll take an expansion and I'll be fine. And then all of a sudden 30 Marines are at your door and you have 2 Stalkers, probably going to lose. Now with the same accord, without being extremely bad, we can actually put them on those builds, and statistically we're right. But that's why it's important to keep up with scouting and everything else. This is also true in the mid-game of figuring out what exactly they're doing. If they're taking expansions, if they're teching a certain route, they can always cancel it. Or as soon as they build 1 Colossus, and I'm using TVP a lot and later on we're having TVP examples, if a Terran player spots a Colossus and they say, aha, they're going mass Colossus, I must get mass Vikings. But what happens if they don't build any more Colossus? What if they just built that one and the Protoss player said, you know what, instead I'm going to build Immortals out of my robotics bay to still use it, but I'll just not make any more Colossus. And so then the Terran player says, haha, I have 16 Vikings to beat your 4 or 5 Colossus army, and I'm just going to crush them. And then the engagement happens, and there's 16 Vikings looking down at Immortals that are just demolishing the Marauder army. And then they just go, huh, we have 24 supply of paperweights flying in this air, and all we did was take out 1 single Colossus. Maybe we should have continued scouting or even poked in a little bit just to confirm if we were overreacting to something or if we are reacting appropriately. Again, that's where random variables come in. Same kind of principle for the late game. If we keep seeing the same unit composition over and over again, usually we can say they're going to stick to it. But what if they switch? What if instead of doing mass Colossus, they start doing mass High Templar and Archon in the late game? That could be really, really frustrating. So even though that we've used some of the previous information to say, oh, they're going to do this, if we don't continually scout them or to verify that information, we can lose just outright. Now, that's scouting information. Now, before I go on, I just want to tell a little bit of story of how I like to play blackjack, hence why I gave a blackjack story, or gave a blackjack example. But my story is involving either one, a good story of blackjack, and then another bad one of just being awful with odds. My first story is I attended Evolution 2010 back in 2010. I think it was in July that year. And of course, after our fighting game event, we went out to play cards because we're in Vegas. What else are we going to do? And I was sitting at this table for quite a long time. And a few of the other patrons weren't completely satisfied with me, since sometimes I would make a little strange play off of basic strategy. And the basic strategy, anyone can go on the internet and find it out, and of just, you know, always split aces and eights, always do this in this situation, take this hit, split here, stand here, and surrender here, blah, 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 blah. Very boring stuff, but you start to make reactions really fast with it. Well, at this time, I was using a counting system, what I thought was effective. And we were, in an 8-deck shoe, we were roughly 5 decks in. So we had some good information of what the rest of the shoe was like. And at that time, and I was in the 5th position, so there were 4 people that would be able to see their cards and then either hit, split, double before I did. And as soon as I got my cards, I had a soft 16, which is an ace and a 5. And I knew the deck was very, very heavy on low cards. And so I said, okay, so as soon as it gets to me, I need to double up and hopefully get a card that's 5 or less. And since the deck statistically is showing that it has a lot of low cards, I should be able to get to 20 or 21 and be awesome. And the dealer was showing, I think he was showing a 10 card. No, he wasn't showing a 10 card. He was showing a 7 or 8. And usually you assume the dealer has a 10 underneath. But anyway, the first player, the first position chair, then takes a hit. It's a low card. Haha, my deduction is correct. But it's too low still for him to still stay on the dealer's 18, we'll say. And so he takes another hit. It's another low card. He stays. He's at 20 now, so he's in a really good position. The second player takes a hit. That's another low card. And he stays there. We get to the third chair. He hits, gets a low card again. He's happy, he goes there. Then the fourth chair goes up. He splits. He gets 2 additional low cards. He hits. He gets a face card on one of his hands. He goes to his next one. He hits. Low card. Hits. Another low card, and then he stands. Well, before I was able to make a decision, before the rest of the chairs took their turns, I said, hey, this deck is really, really full with low cards. But now, after I saw everyone else at the table react, I saw that what I assumed was correct, but now that it got to me, the count was now positive. There were way too many low cards that should have came. And I looked down at my soft 16, and I looked at the dealer's 8, and I said, you know what? Statistically speaking, the next card is going to be a 10, which puts me at a hard 16, which means I have to hit again, and I'm taking a very big risk because 16 is the worst hand in blackjack. Or I can deduce if there were that many low cards that the dealer has another low card and he has to hit. And even though it was a very big risky thing to do and it's against all basic strategy, I said stand. And the dealer looked at me, he kind of leaned in a little bit, he's like, excuse me, sir? And like I even did the hand motion, I was like, yeah, I'll stand here. The dealer looked at me funny. The rest of the chairs, they turned in, they're like, you usually can at least hit there, or you can double. You know, it's a basic strategy says to do this. And I said, no, I'll stand. You know, it's no problem whatsoever. And the guy, the chair 2, who is in his 60s or whatever, starts grumbling. He's like, punk kid doesn't know how to play this game. And then the dealer with his 8 flips over to show a 5, so he has a 13. And the next card, bam, king. He busts, the entire table wins. At that point, the rest of the table was like, oh yeah, it was a really awesome play, awesome play, awesome play. But how many times in Starcraft 2 does that happen? In which you scout early information or you're using your basic build or basic strategy, but as the game goes on, you start getting more and more information that says, you know what, I need to start deviating my play. I need to start doing X more. Oh wow, that was a really fast expansion. How do I either punish that or take advantage of that? Those kinds of things. So I really like that story. I mean, it wasn't even a big bet. My bad story, which I'm about to tell, that was a big bet, and I was really pissed. It was a different day. I don't even think I was just in Illinois casino somewhere. And kind of the same scenario. It was just like, the deck, or the shoe was nearly complete. I had a pretty good count of what it was, and I kept getting these awesome split hands and doubles and everything else, and no matter what, I lost them. And I was like, shit, statistically, you just keep doing it, though, because if you keep doing like a 66% chance of winning, you're hoping that eventually you'll actually win. But it was getting near the end of the night, and that was happening all day, and I wasn't down too much money. I was still around break even. I think I may have been down like 20, 40 bucks max. So it really wasn't that big of a loss of a night. But then the dealer has a 6, which is the best thing for a dealer to have, because you're assuming he has a 10, so he has 16, which is the worst card, or worst hand in blackjack. And it gets to me, and I play relatively aggressive with my hands, because you want to win money, you don't want to just sit there. And I had threes. And threes are really good because you can split them, and I split them. And then on one of my other hands, I got another three. I split them again. And ultimately, I had an 11 as a starting hand, a 10 as a starting hand, and like a 7 type of thing. And I was like, oh god, okay, so my first hand I'm going to double. Since, assuming the player busts, the dealer busts, then all of these hands are going to win. So I need to maximize my return here. So on my 10, I double up and I get a 7, so it's 17. Can't do anything. My 11 hand, I double up again because I can't bust, and I get a 10, 21. Awesome, whoop-de-doo. And then on my third hand, which is a 7, I hit because the casino doesn't allow you to double sometimes, which is weird, but that's a casino rule, or at least the one I was at. And so I hit, and then I hit again, and I'm not in a really good position. I think I stand at around an 18. But essentially, I have one bet, which I split again, which I split again, which I doubled, and doubled again. So I have 5 of my bets on the table. And I was, at that point, betting more than I wanted to, since usually, or at least how I play, I don't have all my chips and then I play until they're all gone. I leave with a certain percentage. So I had a lot of money on this table. And the dealer, of course, with his 16, flips over 4, and then flips over an ace, 21. We push my 21, and I lose all my other bets. Statistically, I should have annihilated him, just taken him to the cleaners. But, I mean, looking even at this Motley Hall problem again, I was nearly banking. I was like, I know this is the door. I know this is the door. I know this is the door. And then he said, nope, you're right here. And I lost the 33% essentially in that regard. So even though you're using random variables specifically, it could still burn you. There's always that off chance that something weird happens, and then you get screwed. And that's why it's so important to use scouting information. Early game, what I've just kind of seen, usually I want to make a decision in a build either at the 4, 6, 8, 10-minute mark type of scenarios, and so I usually send in an early scout. And my builds, I like to be very flexible with them, because I'm not just this hard counter or whatever, but I'm more looking to punish. So if they go Nexus first, I have a strategy. I know immediately what I do if I see Nexus first in my build. Again, if I see Colossus, I know exactly what I'm going to do. Now, if I see the Nexus first and he cancels, my counter is actually horrible to a 4-gate. If I see Colossus and I build 4 Vikings at a time and he only made that one Colossus, well, my follow-up was bad. And so that's why you have to verify your information. So usually if I scout at the 4-minute mark and I see the Nexus, I retreat with my SCV, but by the 5 or 6-minute mark, I poke in again to make sure he's doing that. To make sure I haven't been duped, tricked, or anything else. I'm constantly trying to use this scouting information to reaffirm, yes, this is the right decision. A lot like how my first blackjack example, I was at the chair and I made the decision, I'm going to double. And then after watching everyone else, I've changed my decision based on what I saw. And this is essentially the confirmation of what was going on. The best scenario is if they would have either stayed completely or if they even got more face cards to enable me to get a low card. So that's the verification that I'm talking about in Starcraft 2 with verifying scouting information of unit composition or builds. But to then kind of turn a little bit corner, we want to put you now on what type of player are you? It's hard to actually assume what your opponent type of player your opponent is, unless you really know him and it's a tournament setting. It's like, oh, I know he likes this, blah, 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 blah. But I want to just divide into reactionary players and statistical players. And my example here is in baseball batters when like they have their batting coach analysis their batting habits and everything else. There are reactionary batters and there are statistical batters. Reactionary batters are actually the ones who usually aren't the power sluggers. They're actually the ones who get on base far more frequently, so they usually have a higher batting average than statistical players. Usually. Because what they're doing is the reactionary players are training their eyes and everything else to see the exact release of the pitch from the pitcher to spot what the pitch is. And then they swing accordingly to that. Well, a statistical player will say, this pitcher I know in this situation will pitch to me, in and high. So statistically, I'm just going to swing for it. Like, you're going to look at the timings, but you're not really analyzing the pitch. You're not reacting to it. You're just hoping that your statistical analysis before you even approach the plate is correct. And the biggest example is, how many times have you watched baseball and you see the big slugger go up there and just swoosh, big power swing, and with it by feet. And then you hear the entire crowd, oh, he sucks, blah, 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 on and on and on and on. But what he's doing, he's not reacting to the pitch that's being thrown. What he's doing is he did analysis from his batting coach or whoever saying, you know what? This guy likes to throw you high and in, and probably a four-seam. And so that's exactly the statistical reasoning why that batter is swinging at that precise moment, or location and everything else. It's not just that he's bad, which can happen, but the same thing can happen in Starcraft too. But I won't get into that analysis just yet. I think that's actually our next slide. So that's the baseball example of reactionary statistical, and then you can combine these. So the best batters are actually, they use statistics to say, he likes throwing fastballs, so I'll look for a fastball, but if anything looks weird, like a curveball, then I'll react to it. So in StarCraft 2, a reactionary type of play is changing your build specifically for what you scout. The best examples are Zerg players. Theirs have been noted to be the most reactionary race of all the three races. Since they have overlords and they have a few Zerglings out there, but as soon as they scout, say like their first attack that they have to defend, then they react immediately and stop making drones and just make attack units. That's a big basic example of a reactionary player. Now, some strengths of being reactionary is having an adaptable response. And so another example of non-Zerg related is to say, okay, I'm being a little greedy in this TDP, but if I scout that a 3 or 4 gate, or even later game, we scout a 7 gate that's about to come, I will react to it by throwing down a bunch of bunkers to make sure I don't die. So you already have that in your mindset with your scouting of what you're looking for. Well, if I scout this, I react this way, rather than the statistical way, which we'll go over next. But some weaknesses behind reactionary play is they have the most probability of being tricked or having the wrong information. In which we talked about before, if I scout in and I scout an early nexus or I scout something going on, and then he switches as soon as I leave, well then I'm leaving the base saying, oh, he's doing this, so I'll react this way. But then if he hits me, then I'm like, oh, he's a bad player. I scouted him doing this. Well, actually, he tricked you, and you feel betrayed and hurt inside, and that's why you're calling him bad names, and you really shouldn't. It's just you have to verify your response. And this is different between the statistical player. A statistical player changes with the metagame, doing what wins by the percentages. I missed a buy in here, but I'm adding it now. The biggest example is this Banshee tank timing push that Protoss, I can feel you shudder as soon as I said that. Or I guess you would shudder even more if I said the 111. Just because it just crawls at your skin. It was just like all of a sudden there was this big metagame switch, and that was just so like so frustrating for Protosses because it was still brand new. They didn't know what they needed to scout, and usually Terrans would wall off, so it was made scouting even harder. But then to react to it was nearly impossible since by the time you saw what was happening, there were 3 tanks and 2 Banshees or a Raven. There were even some Hellions. You had no idea what was going on. You didn't know how to stop it. And so then Protoss players started using the metagame and statistically said, I'm immediately just going to do this build, and if a 1-1 happens, I'm going to annihilate it. And you know what? Protoss players started to have these anti-1-on-1 or Banshee tank timing pushes, and they would just demolish that. But the problem was, if Terran players didn't do that, say if a Terran player expanded or did a different type of push, then the Protoss player was behind. They weren't using any reactionary play, any scouting information or anything. They were just specifically building their build around it to annihilate the 1-on-1 because it was so frustrating. And for a long time, and even to this day, when Protoss players do it, they crush it, and they actually have a 60% win average, a 70% win average versus Terran. But that's all statistical play. All of it. Some of the strengths of statistical play are knowing what's strong. Why that's a strength, that's more of the out of game going into it. A lot like the pitching coach saying this pitcher likes throwing this type of fastball and high and in type of thing. You know before the game starts, as soon as you scout a Terran, he's going to do a 1-on-1, so you're immediately going to say, I'm going to do this. Some weaknesses are you usually are very rigid. Very rigid with your build or the unit composition that you're making, since you're not relying on really any scouting information, and effectively you're blind. This is where a lot of people say blind counters, blind builds, or whatever else. Those are really all categorized under the statistical play. They're not relying on scouting information. They're still really awesome fucking good players, and they can still just annihilate people, which is nothing wrong with winning games, but they're under the statistical kind of mindset when they approach the game. They know statistically I'll just keep doing this and I should win. I should just win. And then if I lose for some reason or another, it's because the other player was bad, and if he followed the proper standard timings, I could have won. Which, if you use scouting information, you can always win, or you'll increase your win percentage. And so that's why I want to say being both, or be both. Be both reactionary and be both statistical. So you can approach the game with a statistical mindset, but have a flexible build, have a flexible unit composition that you are able to then adapt and hopefully win the game. Now, having to be both, you have to have a lot of knowledge of what's popular, but you have to understand how to change your build as soon as you spot that they're not doing that popular build. And how you do that is just through practice or whatnot. And you can say, oh man, if I spot him doing a lot of early Marauders, I'm going to get Immortals. But I need to verify that information. Rather than getting 3 Mortals and then pushing and then seeing that all they did was make 2 Marauders and then the rest Marines, then you are crushed. Rather than having 1 Immortal, verifying the information saying, whoa, he's not making Marauders. So I'm going to stop making Immortals, and I may even switch to getting Colossus, because that tech isn't too far off of what I was trying to do anyways with my build. Little changes like that. And as we can see in the bottom right corner, I have a picture of Backgammon. Backgammon is an also really great gambling game that uses statistics, but why I have it here is not only does it use statistics, but you also have to react to what is the current game status. I don't have a full board, but this was the best picture that I got of showing the dice and the placement. Now, there are opening builds that are statistically the correct way to do, the correct play. So say if you opened up with like a 5-11, if you roll the dice and one of them is 5, the other one is 6, that's an 11. I think I said 5-11, but total is 11. That has a statistical advantage if you move this chip this way or this check this way. If you open up like a 6-4, that's a different opening, and it's just based on statistics. But what happens if your opponent does something that's not by the book, or does something a little weird, or a little too aggressive? Rather than having one open check, they have 3 open spots, which is incredibly aggressive, and statistically in your favor if your opponent's doing that. And so you roll the dice, and you actually, you missed the statistic. And then on the next turn, they actually get the saving grace roll. They not only get completely safe, but now their checks are way ahead of yours, and you're behind in the game, which is a risky play, mind you, but it can happen, and it breaks from the norm. And it's when you start having those open checks, then you start being more aggressive in backgammon, in which you start breaking the standard, or you can start breaking the standard to have a more hitting game, which that's what it's called when your check hits a single check of your other opponent. But really great backgammon players are both statistical, but they're also reactionary. And that's the type of mindset that I want everyone to have. Everyone to have. So we're just going back, and now we're going to look at some examples. I have 2 examples to show in which we're going to say what was really good statistically to do and what was really good reactionary to do. And we're actually going to throw up my little splash real quick so I can actually boot this up and all that jazz. Actually, do you want to? No, I do not want to keep that. Lower this. And I said the first one was on the Shattered Temple. Oop, wrong hotkey. There we go. My pretty mug and my little bug right above my head. But anyway, this is a game between me and one of my friends here at the Purdue Starcraft Club, Fear Dragon. He also co-cast with me for the CSL. But we were just kind of dicking around. I think we were doing a best of 3 after one of our games. And even though my play and his play slips here and there, I want to just identify a few moments in time which are pretty good. Right here, not a lot of Terran players do this. I do this, and I actually did it a little wrong. It's hard to do here. But I build a supply depot as close to the barracks, and usually the barracks adjacent to my supply depot, since that's less surface area to a probe harassment. So statistically, I'm thinking I'm in a TVP, he's going to do probe harassment to me. Before I even scout him, since I know his race, I'm doing what I usually call the power I, since it usually makes an I. And in our Metalopolis example, hopefully we can see that power I formation. So that's one form of statistical analysis. And so we're going. He's doing his thing. Nothing too fancy. I'm sending out my scouts and all that fun stuff. Why I also scout on Shattered Temple, and I do the same thing on Metalopolis, I always scout the close by air first, because not only do we never spawn here anymore, but I will actually change my build, which we'll see in the Metalopolis example. And so statistically I'm saying, well, I'm going to be in a better chance to do this strategy, to adapt, and I'll just do that as soon as I scout that. And that you usually don't have to verify where their main is, since Terran players are the only ones to lift off, and they're probably not going to lift off the main that early. And so I think in this variation, oh yeah, I did a gasless. Well, I was about to do a gasless expand, and then for some reason, this was actually a bad response or bad reactionary play. I threw down 4 additional racks to go up to 5 racks, Usually I would do this type of variation if I saw a fast nexus, because I want to put that pressure on, or at least hopefully kill a few probes, and best case scenario, even just cancel the nexus. I'm not trying to win the game, I just want to apply pressure. And since we were dicking around and all that fun stuff, and he's going to be a turd meister and proxy me anyway. This build also, from the get-go, since I'm going to have so many Marines that I'm going to be able to pump out, it should hold off any Void Ray pushes. And for the longest time, I had infinite amount of trouble holding off Void Rays. And so I started doing this build as kind of a counter build to that. So that's looking at the metagame and statistics of knowing what I'm going to do and just start doing it. I'm sorry I can't really analyze his play too much because I didn't talk to him too much about it, and play Protoss. Anyway, let's go on. So we're still ×8 and all that fun jazz. He pokes in a little bit, and now he's preparing this push. Now, what I should have done is either have one of these Marines looking around, looking for any of these proxies. Since if you catch this before he's able to reinforce it or anything else, you can stop it immediately, and the Protoss is infinitely behind. But we're not going to see that. We're going to see me try to defend it, which I do hold it off, obviously. You have a Marauder poke out here. Got really lucky with this. And then I target down the Void Ray. Just poke a little bit more here. You know, blah 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 blah. Yeah, fights are boring. And my macro slips a little bit and all that stuff. I took guys off gas because all I wanted was to make Marines, essentially. Since I was just trying to cheese them, since we were having fun. And that's what friends do. I got enough gas to start researches, but I just wanted to make more and more Marines as I'm building an additional bunker, or additional barracks. So I just want to make sure that he held off, so I'm not pushing out, I'm not counter poking or anything else. But eventually when I say, okay, it feels a little safe, I'm going to snipe, and it feels really aggressive. So now I have some movement, some map control, since this was kind of a soft contain that the Protoss had on me. And now I'm completely blind, and I just want to poke in his front. I should have, hopefully, no, I don't have Concussive Shell, that's a big misstep. But I have +1 and Combat Shield done, so like I have a little bit of timing here. What this Marauder did, he poked in and just got vision of this gold to see if he took that. Since he applied so much early pressure, what a lot of players will do is then take a gold real fast or take an expansion. But I get here and say, he doesn't have an expansion at all. And so my command center, which I was building, can now float down here and feel fairly safe. What I don't spot is him taking his natural here, and that didn't cross my mind, especially since I needed to target this first. So that's a bad reaction by me. And we're going to keep going on, set up a soft contain, poke in, make sure that he can force fields correctly. Absolutely not building, there we go. And so on and so forth. Why I throw down this turret, not only to help against any Void Ray shenanigans, but statistically to help any DTs. And we do have a DT shrine going down here, but I haven't scouted it yet, but statistically I feel I'm ahead, so I just want to keep my advantage. And usually Protoss players, statistically, build DTs when they're behind. Blah blah blah. So I'm not being very reactionary yet. I finally go on and kill here. I needed to poke in at least with one Marine to spot anything here. Huge blunder. Huge blunder. But I'm just sitting, massing more and more Marines, getting +1 armor. A DT did get snuck by, and I forgot to build a missile turret here, so now I'm making that correction. DT even got in here, and even though he was in range of my missile turret, got about 8 kills. Here's my next big reactionary play, and then we're going to move on to the next game, because it doesn't matter. DT hits me. we're actually going to look in. I poke in a little bit, and I saw that probe. I'm actually going to rewind it because it was so critical. And we were on Skype at the time, and I said, you just made a giant mistake. Since I spot that he still didn't have an expansion, but I saw a probe with minerals going back to his base, and it looked like it wasn't on a move command. It looked like it was going straight to the Nexus. And so I said, there must be an expansion right here. There has to be. And at this point in the game, all I'm trying to do is just keep my lead. Make sure he stays on one base, even though he's on two bases. And I take this out and all that other stuff. Then eventually we had the big skirmish. And I think that game I do win, but it's not important. And then our next game is going to be the same me versus Fear Dragon as soon as I can find it. I'm Metalopolis. So it's the same TVP type of thing. And you're going to see one of my reactionary plays, which I talked about a little before, of spotting close air. So I start doing an entirely different strategy. This is the power eye that I was talking about. So now the entire lower half of the barracks is completely blocked by this command center, and even the supply depot buys me some time. So if my SCV was like here, for example, and then scoots all across here, the probe has a little more distance to go. Or if my SCV gets stuck right here, then the probe can't harass it. So I'm covering the surface area. And then as soon as the barracks is done, I lower the supply depot, and then there's more surface area for Marines Marauders to lead. Just a fun little trick that I like to do. And so after I chase him out, I'm going to eventually send out little guys to spot that there was no proxies, and I'm doing a proxy factory play. And this is the big blunder. Not yet, but it will be throughout the game, since I spot that really late. But why it was a huge blunder is I floated this in, my strategy is going fine, I'm going to handle it horribly. Since I rush in here, and I'm going to back up before I lose these Hellions to probes. My micro wasn't the best this game, let's just have it at that. But what happens, we can look at the minimap, he's transferring a lot of probes to this hidden expansion. And I am poking in here, I'm going to slow it down to actually normal time. I poke in here, and before a shot goes off, I say, wait, what's going on? I have guys at your natural, you don't have a nexus here. Where are all your probes? You didn't react to my Hellions because you would have pulled all of them, most likely. And so I even run in a little bit more to try to get vision. Run in a little bit more to try to get vision. And I say, where are all your goddamn probes? And reactionary senses should have said, I need to look at every single part of this map, including the golds probably first. And checking the golds is really easy, since this Marauder could have just popped up here, took the tower, and could have clearly seen both these golds. From there, I needed to send a Marine or something to check around the entire map. Instead, I do not. This is the worst. This is a great example of just doing a statistical play. I'm close air. I'm doing this strategy. No matter what, I'm doing this strategy. I'm not changing it. Oh, probes are missing. He has a hidden natural. It doesn't matter. I'm always going to do this strategy. I'm just doing this strategy. And I can bet that all of you have either done it or have seen your opponents do this. The biggest thing that I see all the time in team games when I'm just messing around, and even some ones, which is sad, I'll see a ZDZ, and one of the Zerg players says, I'm doing a 7 roach rush. I'm doing it no matter what. And so then the other opponent 10 pulls them, and Lings are in his base, and he's the 7 roach rush player says, oh god, there are Lings in my base. Better throw down a roach warren. Roaches will help you, yes. Um, it's going to take you a long time to get those roaches out with the rest of the lings killing all your drones and your queen. But you're going to keep doing roaches, and that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. And that's the complete unfluidity of a statistical player. They say, you know what? 7 Roach Rush is really good. 7 Roach Rush statistically wins me games. Statistically says this is a really great build. Hence why when I say 7 Roach Rush, everyone who's watching this says, oh yeah, 7 Roach Rush, I know what that is. Any build that's been given a name can go under the basic strategy kind of forum because statistically it does well. And that is the best example that I can give right now. And looking at these two replays of seeing a reactionary play to spotting proxies or a hidden, and then this play, which is purely statistical of just like one mindset, this is all I'm doing. This is all I'm doing. Because statistically it works. But what happens when something funny like this happens? Right now he's at a huge disadvantage because even though I haven't killed any probes, I've killed 1 probe. I'm mining way more than him. And my build, you only need 1 gas to do this build. But I have way more minerals. If I spotted this, which I did, but if I reacted saying, just go here, send a couple Marines, 5 Marines, probably even less would have done. Would have killed all of these probes and probably taken out this nexus. So this was a giant paperweight that we just threw away. We burned it. Didn't even do its job for very long. We may have like, hey, look, I got this. Set it on the table. Let's burn it. Like, extremely unuseful or whatever. Even just trying not to push up here and win the game immediately, if I just pulled back with 2 Marines, 2 Marauders, would have taken out this entire base. Reactionary play. But yeah, that just goes over what I wanted to talk about today. As a little recap, we first talked about defining random variables and how it can relate to Starcraft 2 with starting out the game. And then we also talked about what type of player you are. And you can look at and start analyzing your own builds. Do I ever... Okay, I have full picture. Do I ever deviate? Am I spotting for this? Can my build change if I spot something? Can I move my army around a different manner to maximize my efficiency? Oh, I was showing you things, and I have my full face on. I don't know how long I have it on, but I just want to point out, like, no probes, a lot of probes, and no defenses here. I should have reacted to that immediately at this 7-minute mark, and this game goes on for 10 more minutes. Could have won the game right then and there. But that's the type of reactionary play. So to recap, random variables in StarCraft 2, and then what type of player you are. Are you a reactionary player of kind of like that Zerg mindset of like, I'm going to drone, and as soon as I spot something, bam, I'm going to make 1,000,000 lings or 1,000,000 roaches types of thing? Or are you that statistical player that says, statistically, this push works? And even if I scout something that seems a little off, I'm just going to continue on doing this push. Neither player is correct. I think the best way is to be that kind of in-between, that like backgammon mindset of knowing really strong statistical plays, but being able to adapt to it based on what the game state is. So I just want to leave that kind of theory and sit with your mind and kind of fester with it a little bit, and hopefully we can take you a little bit to that next level. And thanks again for joining in. This is On My Face with episode 2, Thursday Theory Crafting. See you guys next time.